I'm Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/ I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Good morning, and I hope you are enjoying the new podcasts that I created, which, again, if you haven't heard of them, one of them is called Shiro, Be Your Own Hero, and that one was about heroism and inspiring yourself to be your own hero in your life instead of trying to look for others to be your hero or mentors. And then the second one is called Think Out for Your Imagination. And that one is about the imagination I had when I was growing up and how I imagined that I could fold up my house into pocket size and take it with me wherever I wanted. And then the next one is Chats, Barks, and Growls, combos with your pet. That one is probably the most fun one because I get to do my voice. And I get to do Truffle's voice. And just, you know, uh, tell you what I think dogs think throughout the day and what they think about their owners. So that one's fun for me. Fun. All right. Happy Friday to my listeners. So, as you may know, I've been going through a lot lately with my migraines, and I wanted to do an episode on what it feels like to be a neurotypical or neurodivergent. And speaking from being a neurodivergent because I don't know what it feels like to be neurotypical. And maybe you feel some of these similar feelings if you're neurotypical too. Anyways, I hope you find some helpful things in this episode today. Excuse me. Do you ever feel invisible because of the learning challenges you have, or because of the emotions you have trouble expressing? Or maybe you feel like no one understands you because it's hard for you to explain what it's like to be you. I'm here to share with you my experiences in these areas and let you know that you are not the only one who has these feelings or emotions. I have and sometimes still feel invisible, especially because my learning challenges aren't obvious all the time. I also feel this way because my chronic migraine condition, especially since I've gotten good at hiding them. I've improved at some of the challenges that I used to experience in social situations, so these aren't obvious anymore. With that being said, there is more I have to work on because I still struggle sometimes with social problems. I struggle when people in my spiritual community comment on my learning disability, which minimizes it. Like when I was trying to explain my challenges with math, they said they have the same even though they're neurotypical. Or like, but you can drive, can't you? Another one is that I'm my mom's daughter. Yes, I have challenges with doing mental math, understanding abstract concepts, and managing my budget. I have to use a calculator to check my math and a pencil and paper to add numbers more quickly. My family helps me understand abstract concepts like math, politics, and managing my finances. I also sometimes feel like a screw up because I have made many mistakes in my life, but I'm starting to realize that everyone makes mistakes and I needed to not beat myself up so much because I need to not beat myself so much when I make mistakes because that doesn't help me or anyone around me. I tend to be too harsh on myself when I make mistakes. I'm trying to remind myself that I'm not the only one who has made that mistake before, which does help because then I know I'm not alone. At least I'm sorry, I need to take some water. I was saying, at least me and my challenges are not invisible or minimized by my family and friends. Also, you're not alone in the challenges that you have in social areas like work, dating, or school. I had many challenges when I was in school because I was still discovering more about myself and LD and how it felt to have it. And I didn't date in college because I wasn't sure I could trust any men outside of my close friends and family because of my childhood trauma. I'm still learning how to date now. And let me rephrase that. I did date a little bit in college, but not really. I only dated one guy, so I'm not really sure that counts. I was working through being homesick and the emotions from the two traumas. This is still in college. But I got through it eventually because I would cry while I was running. I didn't care who would see or hear me cry. I was dealing with my migraines too, which was challenging because I didn't know that they were serious until I graduated and they didn't stop. And I had them nonstop in college, except for when I needed to sleep. That's still true sometimes and has been for the last 16 weeks. I need to get rid of them, or at least minimize them somehow, because I'm a completely different person when I have them. I can be very frustrated, agitated, or on edge easily. Okay, enough about me. Let's look at articles from other NVLDers. This quote is from an article about what is neurodiversity and what it feels like to be diagnosed. Here's Wanda Deschamps, who is a founder and principal at Liberty Company and has autism. Quote, I was 46 when I discovered I was autistic. Settling my life made sense. My difficulties fitting in, my problems at work, and my divorce all made sense when at 46 I discovered I had autism. Better late than never. I'm 10 years old, away at my first sleepover camp. The rest of the girls in my cabin are trying to put together a skit for the camp's variety show, and I can see that it isn't going to come together the way they imagined. I have a sixth sense about these things, like I'm the outside looking in when I'm supposed to be part of something. I want to speak up and tell them how to fix it, but I've learned that being a know-it-all does not make me popular. There was always something about me that most people considered different. As a kid, I didn't enjoy sitcoms or skip rope like other girls my age. I wasn't comfortable hugging friends, but I did love listening to discussions about politics. I've always been talkative and inquisitive, which wore out the patience of my friends and sometimes even the adults around me. My grade 4 report summarized my social deficiencies with improvement needs. I stuck out, but I gradually learned to be less conspicuous. It wasn't until I turned 46 that I learned my uniqueness has a name, autism. That was over 3 years ago. My diagnosis was like discovering a piece of my brain, picking it up, putting it in place, and feeling whole for the first time. This was also like receiving the key to unlocking my life and leaving for the first time, according to my values, principles, beliefs, and choices instead of being weighed down by the expectations and assumptions of others. What I've found out since is that there are a significant number of others like me, individuals who weren't identified as having autism until midlife. And for reasons that are still coming to light, many of them are women. Close quote. So even though I don't have autism and I have NLD, I can still relate to that article and to Wanda because NLD is similar to autism, and I've worked with individuals who have autism. Excuse me. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is when I found out that I had NLD, it, like Wanda said, it was like, for her, it was like she was finding out a puzzle. She found out the puzzle piece that was missing to her brain, and she was able to put it in and fit it in, and was able to find out more about herself. And for me, it was like a light bulb went off when I found out that I had NLD, and I had so much relief in being able to know why I was so different from everybody else in my family, and being able to know how to better how to help myself and how to have others help me, and be able to try to work through the challenges that I have, and be able to try to make life easier for me in some ways, so that I don't have to struggle through so many of the challenges that I have. And that's what I try to do with this podcast. And to try to talk through the challenges that I have, to see if that helps you in some way, whether you have NLD or if you have autism or ADHD or whatever learning challenge you have, or whether you don't have a learning challenge and you are neurotypical, but you have challenges in life that you can relate to in some way. So just let me get some water and then I'll read the next article to you. So the next article is titled Very Grand Emotions, How Autistics and Neurotypicals Experience Emotions Differently by Tara Vance, written on March 23rd in 2019. Quote, characterizations of autistic people often reflect a profile of a stoic, unfeeling, emotionless autonomon. Many times the only emotion ascribed to autistics, especially by the lay writers who populate the dustbin of Amazon Kindle's self-published section, is explosive anger. This is an accusation which has often been leveled against me, usually much to my confusion. One notable example was a social media post I was tagged into about infant circumcision. The journal article in the post was absolute crack science. It was emotionally manipulative, purposefully misleading, and rife with untruths and ethical violations. So instead of responding to the topic, I talked about the lack of veracity and the void of research ethics from the authors of the journal article. If a debate were happening, my friends deserved to have accurate, factual information to make such a important decision. Immediately, everyone in the discussion assumed I had coldly taken a position in favor of routine infant circumcision. It was intense. I was accused of intellectualizing to preserve a personal preference I hadn't stated or even considered a personal preference of not having a conscience of, in quotes, supporting genital manipulation and other atrocious attributes and thoughts. The more I attempted to reason, the worse the situation became, and the more convinced people were about my terrible personality and empty heart. Explaining was regarded as manipulation, being competitive, and again, having no feelings. I lost friends over that conversation. I didn't realize I was speaking a different language. I didn't realize that my emotional experience was different from theirs. None of us did. This was one of my similar instances in life. I have historically walked away from such situations feeling devastated, angry, confused, and frankly, like everyone else, was delusional. They felt the same way about me. My massive ego is almost always a part of the charges in these discussions, parallel to the narrative that I am emotionless. What most bothered me was that no one was understanding how deeply I did feel. Close quote. Um, I'm just gathering my thoughts about that. So, first of all, sorry about some of that content in there. But I think that's important because it does speak to what Tara was saying in terms of how she didn't realize how the conversation took a bad turn, and then she tried to fix it, and it just went worse, and she couldn't. She tried to quit while she was ahead, and that didn't work for her. And I know for me, I don't remember. I was going to try to bring a topic up or a time up when that happened to me in one of my sociology classes in college, and I don't remember enough of it to really speak to it. But all that I do remember is that I didn't really talk about the topic well enough to add to it. And my professor brought that up later in office hours, and um, he didn't know I had NLD, and I didn't know how to really tell him enough about NLD and why that happened, because sometimes you want to add to the topic or the conversation, but you don't know how to. And you may think you are adding to it, but you're not. And then you realize you're not, and then you just become very quiet. And then when you remember that happening, you're like, I'm just going to stay quiet and I'm going to let everybody else talk. And while that is, helpful for everybody else, it's not helpful for you, because you lose the chance to be able to work on your social cues, and then everybody else doesn't get to hear your thoughts on the topic, whether they're quote unquote right or wrong. Yeah. So the last article is titled Very Grand Emotions: How Autistic and Neurotypicals Experience Emotions Differently, from Psych Central. Quote, the reason is because if someone complimented me on work I was doing, then I would feel they were implying that I was laboring in the interest of self promotion or validation seeking. These aren't spoken values, but something we feel innately. This is how I labor with other autistics. We correct each other, we offer what expertise and insight we can to sharpen the other's work, to add that volume and clarity to the other's love song. My new friend and I have already joked that we won't be sending each other birthday cards or holiday gifts. We don't ever talk about clothes or the weather, or even ask each other, how was your day? To us, these details are things we will offer up if it's relevant. If the other doesn't address something adequately enough, we tell them directly, I still want to talk about that thing you didn't respond to with enough focus. We do sometimes talk about the family health and our personal emotions, those secondary feelings most people experience as primary emotions. Close quote. So, I can definitely relate to that quote because it's sometimes hard for me to talk about my emotions because I don't want to talk about them too much in terms of the past, because sometimes I don't know how to turn it off, and sometimes I don't want to talk about them, and other times I do, and that's I know that's contradictory. Sorry, got tongue tied. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I can relate to where they, like the article said, they weren't really addressing the important things of how their day went or the birthday cards unless they seemed like that was important, because those seemed trivial or small. And yes, those are important and they're not trivial to some people. And I guess it really depends on how you were brought up and, how you would react to it. And I would say that, this does relate to what I was saying earlier in the episode, where everybody who has learning challenges, or if you're neurotypical, we all respond in different ways to situations, and we all will ask questions differently, and we will talk about different things because we're all unique and different. So that's why I picked that one, because it kind of speaks to what these two individuals talk about and how it's different from what most people talk about. So I hope that you were able to get some lessons out of it. Maybe you didn't, I'm not sure. Maybe you will realize you did later. Like I said, I have been dealing with some challenging things recently, so I will be needing to write some scripts this weekend. Otherwise, I will be behind. So, yeah. I hope that you are doing well and that you are being able to use this podcast to help you learn some new things and learn how to, live with life and be able to use it to your advantage and be able to love it, because sometimes it's very challenging. So I'll talk to you next Friday. Bye. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than originally it was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.